How the thinking mind lives has changed quietly. We have not changed what we think, but we have changed the environment in which we think. The modern environment is dense with signals. We experience a constant flow of information with no definition. There is always something to read, reply to, and think about. And so attention adapts. It becomes quicker, more responsive, more alert to change. But in this adaptation, something less visible begins to thin. We feel as if our thoughts are bound together internally. We feel as though our thoughts are both in motion and also in a place of resolution. We can spend all day being stimulated without feeling fully satisfied, as if the entire day has been used up occupied, but not filled with what is good for us enriched. The imbalance is not dramatic, it's very subtle in nature. It is a slower change in the ecology of your inner world. The deeper problem is not simply that there is too much to process. It's because the conditions for having inner steadiness have been fractured. Humans have evolved their attention within rhythms, a cycle of engaging followed by a natural pause. These cycles allow thought to deepen, emotion to settle, and perception to clear by the accumulation of time. It is easy to see that the natural rhythms we have experienced have been replaced with continuous flow. There is no clear boundary between input and reflection. There is no longer an ending to what is consumable. The lack of the natural ending creates a unique lack of structure in the mind. The mind may still be used, but it does not have a base foundation, responsive but not grounded. This leads to a form of cognitive excess that is not only about volume but also about incompletion. Information is encountered before previous information has been absorbed. Emotional impressions overlap without resolution. Attention will continue to move only forward and not incorporate what has come before it. Taken over time, this will contribute toward an underlying and ongoing fatigue. Not a fatigue from physical stimulation, but rather from the accumulated experience of only partially processing everything before attention. Of thoughts that begin, but do not finish. Of experiences that are registered, but not fully lived. Because this condition is widely shared, it becomes normalized. A restless mind is no longer recognized as restless. It is simply interpreted as being engaged. But beneath this normalization, something essential is gradually weakened. The capacity to experience the mind as a coherent, inhabitable space. Instead, the inner life becomes a surface of continuous activity, always receiving, rarely settling, always moving, rarely arriving. The ongoing process renders the potential for having an inner reference and an ability to remain grounded much more difficult to access. Not because it isn't there, but because you cannot find it unless the conditions under which it exists are maintained. In order to consider the idea of inner peace from this angle, it is helpful to develop a different way of thinking about it. Instead of approaching the mind as something that can be filled with content or managed, the mind can be seen as a living structure, an ecology. The mind is an interacting system created by both the physical inputs to it, as well as the way those inputs are connected to each other and the effects they have on the system over time. In the same way, there is not only one way to achieve balance in any ecological system. It emerges from proportion, from the presence of boundaries, from rhythms that allow growth, rest, and renewal to coexist. The same is true for the inner life. There are three quiet conditions that shape this inner ecology. The first is through selective permeability. In natural systems, the boundaries that exist between one section of the environment and another can restrict, as well as allow interaction between one another. They allow for the exchange of materials between the two sections, but there is an element of discernment. They filter. Without this selectivity, the system becomes saturated, and saturation reduces sensitivity. When everything is allowed in, nothing can be fully experienced. The mind begins to register impressions without absorbing them. Selective permeability restores proportion. It is not about avoiding the world. It has to do with allowing few inputs into one section in order to allow the inputs that do enter more of your attention. This type of experience will change the way you experience your life over time. Less accumulation, more depth. The second condition is temporal spaciousness. Every ecology depends on intervals. Intervals provide a space for things to settle down amongst themselves with no new input. If an interval does not occur, then there will be a great deal of activity but no integration. For the inner life, temporal spaciousness means allowing thoughts to complete their own course. Emotions must be permitted to flow in their natural rhythm without interference. Perception can only deepen if it is allowed to persist in time. This is not empty time, it is structured openness. A quiet form of continuity where experience is not fragmented into isolated moments but allowed to form a sequence. If there is no stability for the mind, it will stay at the beginning phase forever, always encountering, rarely finishing. The third condition is tonal stability. Every environment carries an underlying tone, a subtle atmosphere that shapes how everything within it behaves. In the inner world, this tone is created by the quality of attention. Whether it is hurried or patient, fragmented or continuous, reactive or receptive. When this tone is unstable, shifting constantly, the inner space becomes difficult to inhabit. There is no consistent ground. However, if there is some stable structure to proceed from, regardless of how complicated or lacking in stability an individual's situation is, there can be settled experiences created by holding those experiences in that stable structure. They will not require resolution immediately. They will not overload the system. They will take place in a more expansive area of stability. This is what allows depth to form. Not due to the lack of disturbance, but due to the absence of disturbance being all-consuming. These three conditions, selective permeability, spaciousness over time, and stable tone, do not clarify the outside world. They create the inner experience of the outside world. They introduce form where there might otherwise be only accumulation. And when the inner environment has form, it becomes inhabitable, a place where attention can return without effort, where experience can unfold without being rushed, where the mind is not simply active but quietly organized. It is here that we can derive a different sense of clarity. Traditionally, we connect clarity with an abundance of resources available for consumption, more access, better comfort, and an increased ability to refine the experience of what we consume or experience. But we've now reached a point where the abundance of information will lead us nearer to saturation point. Saturation will, over time, lead to a decrease in clarity of thought, so the definition begins to shift. To enjoy what once would have required adding to your life, you must instead learn how to balance with the structure of your inner self. The ultimate clarity is the ability to love one's mind and not simply have an open mind to everything. Selective attention will no longer be restrictively selective, but will be a result of excessive imbalance, where fewer inputs allow for deeper experience. There is also the clarity of temporal spaciousness, time that is not immediately filled, unoptimized or unrepurposed moments, allowing time for thought development and emotional closure without interference. The compression of time in today's society has lessened the opportunity for people to experience this type of openness. Luxury has historically been defined by the rarity of the item. Then there's also the clarity of tonal stability, an inner atmosphere that does not shift with every external signal, where attention holds a certain steadiness even as conditions change. This creates a form of inner continuity that is not dependent on circumstance. These types of opulence are hidden from sight. They exist in secrecy. But they change the quality of experience in a fundamental way. They reduce internal noise. They soften the need for constant engagement. They allow clarity to emerge not as something pursued, but as something that appears when the environment is balanced. In contrast, much of what is commonly pursued follows a different logic. More input, more speed, more responsiveness. But without a stable ecology, more leads to imbalance. And imbalance makes depth difficult to sustain. So this reframing is not about withdrawal, it is about calibration. The inner environment has been carefully designed so that clarity is not something that needs to be sought after repeatedly, but can simply be sustained quietly. Over a period of time, an incremental change starts to develop. The brain no longer has such a characteristic as being a surface that is continuously being inscribed upon. Instead, it forms into an avenue with its structure, a location where items come into, establish themselves, and can, if needed, depart. There is therefore less of a compulsion to interact with every single thing, not as an act of restraint, but because not everything feels necessary anymore. Attention becomes quieter, more deliberate. Not rigid, but consistent. And within that consistency, a different kind of peace appears. Not the absence of complexity, but the ability to hold it without becoming unsettled by it. This is not an accomplishment that is attained only once. It is something that is maintained through the conditions that support it. A form of inner steadiness that does not depend on perfect circumstances, but on the environment that has been allowed to take shape within. Perhaps the quiet realization is this: inner peace is not something that arrives from outside. It is something that grows from the way the inner world is formed. And in a time where the mind is asked to carry more than it can easily hold, there is something deeply restorative about learning how to hold less more completely.